everyone. I am Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace, and this is our third show. I am so excited. I can't believe that I've gotten 3 shows in the first month. This has gone so much faster than I even anticipated. In fact, when I was setting this up, I thought, maybe I can get 2 dozen, maybe 3 dozen people in this group to have these conversations. And today we hit 300, so in not even a month. So that is awesome. We are really spreading the word and having these great conversations, and you are helping me change the world. So I really, really, really appreciate that. Some housekeeping. We hope to only have an hour, but who knows, hopefully. At the end of this show, I'm going to announce the next show. And because I'm personally involved, I am taking to you guys to decide what the next show is. We might not cover everything we need to cover in this show, so we might need to continue it. And if our guest tonight can't come back next week, then we have some more guests that want to get in. But I don't know right now, and I don't want to put all of the decision on me to decide whether or not this conversation needs to be furthered next week, or if we can go on to another subject. And that subject is really interesting to me, and I have so many people I want to talk about that. That topic is probably going to go for a couple weeks, not probably, definitely. So I'm going to leave it up to you guys to decide if you want to continue on this religious trauma conversation or move on to deconstruction, which would be the following show. I want to thank Jacob Montgomery because he keeps me sharp, and he brought up some information or some questions rather, that made me do some research today. And so I want to start with a PowerPoint. Hi, Tim. How are you? I see there's 10 people on. Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me? Everything's good? Give me a thumbs up. We're good. There's a bit of a delay, so I understand that. But hi, everyone. So let me move over to sharing my screen. I want to show you what exactly we're talking about with religious trauma and some of the stats that are involved. So I started with the types of abuse, because a lot of people, when we say religious abuse, they immediately think that we are talking about sexual abuse. And there are onion layers of abuse. There are so many different factors that come into play, and it's not just physical and sexual abuse. It is also emotional abuse. The types of physical abuse are the violence, which is domestic abuse and spankings, as example. Sexual abuse, which would be the purity, marital ownerships, the patriarchy, and then, of course, rape. Disfiguration, we have the female genital mutilation. Circumcision I put in there because I consider it as such. And castration for the eunuchs or anything else that go for that level of extreme. But we also have the emotional factors of it, which are the emotional wounds from everything I've already listed, the control as well as the submission, the patriarchy versus the purity, abandonment and ostracization, and then the base of it all is the shame and fear that is involved. Starting with the Protestant church, because we know so much about the Catholic Church. The thing with the Protestant churches is there aren't as many legal issues. So everybody has been really coming on with the Catholic abuse because there's been so many criminal cases against it. But we don't really hear that much about within the Protestant churches. These are some stats. I'm going to put this into the group so you guys can go over this. But 81% of the victims were male, and the majority were between 11 and 14. I think a lot of people also would assume that they were younger, at least I did, and but most of them are teenagers. Startling, 1 to 38% of all clergy across all Christian denominations have engaged in sexual misconduct. That just drives me crazy. For the Protestant church, there's been 326 criminal cases in 41 states. Now, these cases, this 326 are only reported because there's no way of checking. If people are hiding it like the Catholic Church did for so many years, like and Protestants we hear all over the internet, those are not going to be reflected in these statistics. They cross the 41 states, and 80% of them are sexual assault, of rape, groping, and the cases ranged from 1 to 20 victims per case. The U.S., Florida tops it, of course, as far as offenders, followed by Texas, California, Illinois, and then Tennessee and Alabama, respectively. 45%, by the way, this 105, these numbers here are for the amount in the 326 survey. So 105 of these occurred off church property, 35% occurred on church grounds, and then 19% occurred in both. 98.8% are male offenders, and then the females are just 1.2.4. 73% of them are white, 18% black, and then less than 10% are Hispanic, Asian, or Native. Males are average of 40 years old. Females are average of 23. So there's a big discrepancy in the ages. These are the roles that are the top offenders in the Protestant church. These have some duplication over in the Catholic Church, but these are specifically for the Protestants. You can see the higher the power, the more the abuse. The female offenders were volunteers, ministers, and wives, but we also have to keep into consideration that a lot of that is because females do not hold the roles. There used to be, I found out today, this huge problem with nuns back in the 1800s where they were totally accosting people, primarily women, but there was a lot of abuse back then too. But now that women are so excluded from any type of roles within the church, their numbers are automatically going to be lower. The purity culture is rape. There's no other way around it. It is an expectation of women to be submissive, including children, as well as the men to be controlling. I didn't know I was being raped. I thought that that was what life was. I thought that no matter what my husband said, and he reminded me on a regular basis, but that I was to submit. I didn't know for years later that it was rape. My tears didn't matter because that's what God wanted. My pain didn't matter because that's why I was made a woman, was to be submissive. Spankings. I was spanked every day in school from 2nd to 5th grade because, and this will shock no one that knows me because I talk too much in class. I was a straight A student, but yet I was spanked every day in class. That is abuse. And not only was I spanked at school, that meant that I was spanked at home. There's a lot of submission that goes into these spankings. If I particularly pissed the teacher off, it would happen in front of my class. Most of the times I was sent to the principal's office where I was put my hands on the desk and he would come behind me and spank me every day. Straight A student, talk too much in class. But this submission not only creates a trauma-based relationship with God, your parents, and all of those, but it also fails to teach you communication. I was only taught how to hit. And in high school, my mom saying, keep your hands to yourself, when that is all I was ever taught. Violence was the solution to every answer. And because of that, those types of things create generational curses. It's not necessarily a curse, it's just not knowing any better. I didn't know how to communicate. I was only told to hit when things were wrong. And this is continually processed through the Protestant church. I have some examples here on the screen of Larry Tomczak of Sovereign Grace Network saying that he would spank his 18-month-old multiple times a day. It even admits there's another one, Ted Trips, that lists how the children should be spanked, and there's not allowed to have any type of emotion involved in it too. You are to be meek and to love the person who is beating you, and say this is from God. One time I was sick of it. I probably had calluses on my bottom, and my mother spanked me, and instead of saying, "I'm sorry, thank you," I just got up and walked away. All hell broke loose. She grabbed me and was beating me down the hall because I didn't submit. She viewed that as dismissive of the beliefs and rebellious. So not only are you to be beaten, you are to welcome it, to praise it, and to thank your parents and God for this. This creates so much trauma. Corporal punishment leads Christians to believe they must cultivate a lifelong attitude of submission. Parents, women are taught to submit. Joshua Harris says that he interprets all Christians to submit even when suffering to unjust leadership. So wives must resist the sinful impulse to fight back. That's not in my blood. John Piper said women must endure attitudes of submission even towards abusive husbands. I just can't. Now to Catholics. 4% of all priests in the U.S. had sexual abuse allegations made against them. 11,000 children. But they paid price high. They've paid at least $3 billion since 1950. It varies. It's worldwide. It is systemic. I could not find a single country that was void of some type of Christian, whether it be Catholicism or Protestant abuse. It just goes on. And it's not new. This floored me. There is sexual abuse noted as far back as the 11th century. Martin Luther claimed that the Pope was committing pederasty and saying that the cardinals in Rome practiced sodomy. This is not something new, and it all derives from power. They blame the sacrament, saying that, people can't come forward and say, "Oh, well, he did this because of confession." They blamed homosexuality. So this is when they actually changed the Bible in the 1940s from pederasty, which is pedophilia, to homosexuality, making that the reason to justify their own abuse. They also just said it was a decline in morals, and then finally celibacy drove this abuse in all of the church. And because of Jacob, he asked me to check into the education system and how it varies according to the religion. And in my opinion, it proves that it's power. Power drives the abuse. An estimated 10%, and this is derived from the public school system, an estimated 10% of all students will experience sexual misconduct by a school employee by the time they graduate from high school. So picture the people who are both in church and in a public school, and the trauma just envelops. So now we're going to get the stories of why and what has happened when this type of trauma occurs. And I've lost my mouse. There we go. First we have, hold on, technology is getting to me today. Brady. Brady, a secular humanist, co-hosts the Life After podcast after experiencing spiritual abuse. He grew up in an unstable Southern Baptist household, which inadvertently pushed him to commit harder to the church. He committed his future repressing his homosexuality to the full-time ministry. During a time of great loss and spiritual abuse, he left the faith and finally gave freedom to his sexuality. Years into his deconstruction, he created the Life After podcasting community to help others identify spiritual abuse, trust professional therapy, and heal from religious trauma. Welcome, Brady. How are you? I can't hear you. There you are.
I'm sorry. I was on mute for a second. That was my fault. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have Rebecca. Rebecca Peck is a small business owner in New Jersey, a former minister, a military spouse, and the mother of 3. My mouse is not cooperating today. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
And last but not least, we have Steve Slocum. Steve Slocum was a deeply committed evangelical Christian who lived with his family of 5 in Kazakhstan for 5 years as missionaries in the 1990s. When the leader of a missionary team eventually revealed himself as a malignant narcissist, Steve and his family suffered severe religious abuse and trauma, and Steve's son, Andrew, ultimately took his own life. Steve's been reconstructing his life and focuses these days on working towards a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. He is the author of the award-winning book, Why Do They Hate Us? Making Peace with the Muslim World, and the founder of the nonprofit SalamUSA.org. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. I am so happy for all of this panel. I'm going to remove that so we can actually get everybody's names.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we were talking about before the show started, I want this to kind of be fluid. So, Brady, you got the top right position just by the luck of the draw. So, I want to start with you and for you to tell us your story and what you've done. I know that in these shows, I try to have a lot of instruction and things that we can learn from. And with this show, it's going to be one word: stories educate people. Our pain educates people, because knowledge with this really is key. So the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I grew up a little bit south of St. Louis, and my dad was a deacon at our Southern Baptist church. So my family was really involved with everything, but it was a very unstable household. I'm not going to try to diagnose my family members, but there's some things flying around there that made things pretty difficult as a kid. We'll put it that way, right? So growing up in that home wasn't always easy. My parents got divorced when I was 7 because my dad was cheating on my mom, and there was no repercussions for him. He just went down the street to the next Southern Baptist church, and who really cared? And we would just kind of like were that family. So I was going from house to house, and it was a lot of instability. And I really just committed myself even more to the faith, and got involved in the church as much as I could, because that was the only source of stability that I had at that point. Growing up, though, I also realized that I was attracted to men, and that was going to be a thing that I knew I was never going to be able to act upon. So when I was 18 or 19, I started to be open with people of, hey, this is what I struggle with. I struggle with same-sex attraction. But then, I knew that it was something that was never going to be an option for me. And as I got older, I was open about that, met a woman, we got married, and we had a kid. Then I found out she was cheating on me with somebody she met on Ashley Madison. The story gets good, though. And
I love your story, by the way. I tell it all the time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I ended up taking her back 3 or 4 times. We tried to work things out. It wasn't going to work. There was a lot of there was a lot of dishonesty happening. We'll put it that way. And that's when our church got involved. And that's when the spiritual abuse got really heavy. And then they tried to counsel us, like a few of the pastors. And it was just the most abusive counseling ever, and was just very flighty, very unstable, very unbiblical even, and was very much like would take advantage of me, and would also take advantage of my ex-wife throughout it. In fact, one of them hit on her during it. It was insane. So they ended up disfellowshipping me because I allowed my ex-wife to divorce me. So I was completely shunned from my community. And that was also at a time that my best friend had just passed away of sudden heart failure out of nowhere. He was my age. So having to grieve that, becoming a dad, I was outed. Even though I never acted on being gay at that point. That wasn't until afterwards. And so it was just all this change and shunning all at once. And that was kind of during the time that I had to start healing. And a friend of mine, Jimmy Lee Finch, she had posted an article on her Facebook about religious trauma. I read it, blew my mind, helped me identify a lot of things. I was in therapy that helped direct my therapy and understands that all better. And that's whenever I ended up starting a podcast, just because I wanted to be able to help other people. And then we eventually started an online community. Fast forward a couple of years, my ex-wife started to deconstruct more. We became friends again. She realized she's queer. She marries a woman, and now we co-parent our kid 50-50. And do what we can to like help other families and stuff going through the same thing, and also just to raise awareness of like therapy is a great thing. Get it, understand what trauma is and what religious trauma is, and get it helped. So that's my story in a nutshell.
I love the healing. I love the acceptance of your story. I love the partnership that, I mean, I see all your posts on Twitter and you're talking about you and your ex-wife and her wife, and it just brings me so much love. And that's what everything's supposed to be for, right? I mean, we're not supposed to hate ourselves. We're supposed to love ourselves, and we're not supposed to deny ourselves. We're literally, I had never found another sect outside of religion that denies God's making. I mean, they claim that God made everything, but then hate everything God made. The hypocrisy and the irony is there. Thank you
really good
so
point.
much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Steve, we have some people in here that are chomping at the bit for you. It's your turn. Tell us your story. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh,
no. Unmute yourself. Cannot unmute your guest because they chose to.
Sorry. My bad.
Okay, hi, Steve.
No.
You pulled a break.
Hi. No, I actually would like to defer, and I would like to have Rebecca go before me, if that's okay.
That's fine. Your floor, Rebecca.
Oh, okay. Well, I grew up. We moved a lot, so I was always in different churches. So I went to like Southern Baptist churches and Super Pentecostal churches, and basically, I think we went to Methodist churches. So we moved like every year, sometimes a couple of times a year. So I had a lot of different church experiences. My parents divorced when I was very young, and my stepfather came into my life when I was about 3, and was a young guy trying to do his best to be a dad, and ended up being quite abusive in my childhood. It was very difficult to kind of reconcile the going to church several times a week, twice on Sunday, Wednesday. Sometimes there was like other church meetings in the week. I also went to Christian school. It was hard to reconcile that, I guess, that facade of love with the home life I was having. And then as I started to branch out as a teenager, realizing how prevalent grooming and sexual abuse was in the church, and that it was allowed to be so, prolific because it was never called, really. You don't involve, at least the churches I went to, police weren't involved, people weren't really held accountable, people still were in the same room with people who they had assaulted. And I remember thinking about the girls that I knew when I was 16 or 17, and I couldn't think of one of them that hadn't been assaulted in the church. So as I became an adult, I graduated high school, and I left to go to a full-time ministry where I preached and I sang, and I went to like jails and nursing homes and schools and like did skits. I love the people I met through that experience, but leaving it, I felt, because I left it in a way where I was standing up for myself against some misogyny that I saw, some kind of rape culture that I saw. I got sent home, basically, for speaking my truth. And again, I was raised to be ashamed of sexuality. That's a whole purity culture. And so as a woman, not even with the sex aspect, but just as a woman, I was always kind of on the low end of the totem pole as far as like having authority, even over my own life. And so once I left that, they basically said, you're out of God's will. And for me, for a girl who was a total pleaser and was somebody who wanted to do God's will only, that was like completely traumatizing for me. And they said you'll be pregnant in a year, even though I was a virgin. I was 22 and I was a virgin, and I was pregnant a year and a half, but I was also married. But it doesn't matter. But I feel like they cursed me when I left for any weight that words can carry. And so I spent a long time in my adulthood disassociating from things. I kept trying church. I led worship, and finally, when my kids got to a certain age, we all looked at each other in 2017 and we said, we're not going to do this anymore. I don't think we believe this anymore. And so I've been kind of wandering since then, learning to ground myself, aside from, the dissociation tendency I had as a kid and growing into adulthood. And my trajectory is a little different. I don't have like a big, like a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow story. I'm still getting there. And so once I realized that PTSD could come from religious experiences, that kind of was mind blowing for me. So I'm definitely a survivor, and I'm so happy to be here, and I'm really excited to be here and learn and not be alone, I guess, because sometimes you feel alone, especially when you've left that community and your whole family's in that community and you just feel isolated, and so I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. I think that's one thing that social media did really well for me, was to connect me with so many other people, to make me not feel so alone. I mean, people who have known me for 20 years or even longer. Roman Guzman just said something. He was actually my first boyfriend in 5th grade. I bet you he's 4. He had no idea. So people have known me all my life have no idea, because it's not something that you talk about unless you feel a camaraderie with somebody else to say, oh, you're damaged too. We're not just sinners. We're not just outcasts. We're actually victims of this patriarchal environment and institution. One of the things that I think I skipped a slide, but my head exploded when I came to the Jehovah's Witnesses history of sexual abuse, and they're dealing with a law. Head exploded. Let me rephrase that. They're dealing with the law because their law requires that the victim have 2 witnesses to prove the abuse.
Wow.
So if it's a he said, she said, then the man always wins. The victim is traumatized, is outed a lot of times, kicked out of the church. So it goes on, and the victimization furthers when they deny the victim's rights, when they say it didn't happen, and that happens with a lot of women, especially because we don't have the power or the voice. Thanks, Paul. Different show. And this will really lead into the purity culture talk that we're going to have in a couple weeks too, because that is a lot of trauma comes from that too. Are you ready, Steve?
Yes, I'm unmuted and I'm ready. My spiritual abuse took place over 20 years ago, and I was serving as a missionary. Had my wife at the time, my 3 children there in Kazakhstan. We were very committed. So committed that we felt that we should be, reaching out to Muslims to convert them to be Christians. And we took it to the limit. While we were there, the leader of our group we had a very, very happening scene there. We had lots of people having spiritual awakenings, and it was really a very exciting time, really numbering in the hundreds. So we got a lot of attention, and the leader was systematically eliminating anyone who caught on to him. And I actually was early in the game and participated. He would always recruit certain ones, promising them promotions, higher positions, etc. And then so I myself participated in an ouster of a family. We just took a family out. We just took them out and ruined their career almost. And I was completely oblivious. Over some time, as this pattern began to be repeated, I started to catch on, and so then it was my turn, and I said, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm gonna leave this this team and do something different. And I told him this, and it was just a one-on-one conversation with him. Well, then guess what? You don't leave the mafia, and then he really came after me. One of the interesting things was he visited our family in the pastor role, and I had a tough marriage. I don't deny that. We were struggling, and so he was inquiring about my marriage, and so I'm honest for whatever dumb reason, and say, yeah, we're still struggling. So at the close of the conversation, he says, well, I don't. If you're going to leave our group, I don't think you should come back to church anymore. So I say, okay, well, I won't come back anymore then. And then the next day, I think it was the very next day, he stands up in front of the whole church and announces that we're excommunicated from the church, and that the reason is because of infidelity in our marriage. And on top of that, he forbade everyone in the church, whether our team members and all the church members that I've been working with for the last several years, just pouring my life out forbade them all from seeing us. And guess what? Everyone obeyed. Everyone obeyed. No one saw us. We were instantly alone. And that was the end of it. Unfortunately, well, fortunately, our home church actually stood with us. They were very clued in. They saw what was going on, and they still supported us, and so we were able to stay there. And so when this guy figured out, I'm going to call him by his name. His name is John, and I can't give you too many details because honestly, right now there's an ongoing FBI, CPS, and a mission agency deep investigations going on about this guy and his family right now. But his name is John, and so when he couldn't take me out, he went after my son. He had a guy at the school who was his recruit, who happened to be my son and his son's teacher, and so he ordered this teacher to begin writing my son and making him a discipline problem, and attempting to get him kicked out of the school so that we would all have to leave the field, of course, because of our family problems. And so, I didn't realize it. I wasn't unfortunately, I was so clueless. So clueless of everything. I mean, I'm all starry-eyed thinking, here we're just over here doing God's work, and but my son was systematically being just taken out. He was being systematically emasculated, and I didn't. He would come home so angry, and I'm thinking always just normal stuff, between a adolescent kid and his teacher, his male teacher, whatever. And anyway, long story short, if it came out that the teacher eventually confessed to being a pedophile and having acted out with kids at the school in his home. And so when I heard that, that's when I knew this isn't normal. And we immediately left. I immediately got my family out of there, took them home, but unfortunately it was too late for my son. He just was in a depression. There's a lot of complicated factors, but he was in a deep depression as a result of that year in school. And when he was 21 years old, he ended his life in a difficult moment. So yeah, it was that trauma. If you want to talk about religious trauma, that was very traumatic. And we didn't know that much about trauma back then. We didn't know that, they knew only a thing they knew about trauma was PTSD with, people who were, in combat kind of situations. So, yeah. But now we know, that trauma, affects us deeply in ways. And so we're still working through it. It's been difficult, really difficult. It was some of the darkest days I've ever lived. But we're getting through it, and my son's okay. I'm at peace with that now. But yeah, it was very difficult.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Steve. It breaks my heart every time, and it's an example of the power that is used from the church to be able to accomplish anything. And you unfortunately experienced the worst of it, the worst of the repercussions and the consequences of such abuse. And I'm really, really glad you're still here and that you're here carrying on his legacy to stop the trauma and pain in everybody else. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Where do you guys see most of your help in your healing? For me, it was processing the fact of separating God from the church. It was realizing that evil is everywhere and hides very conveniently within the walls of the church. But I also, experienced abuse from managers and all of those types of things. So as Jacob had encouraged me to research, we see that it's also in the education system. But the religious trauma is so painful because when you get into a religion, you literally give your heart and soul, so there's this level of trust there that, my ex-husband used to say to me, but God commanded you, you have to submit. I am the leader. And when you have literally, that type of indoctrination saying that it doesn't matter what you feel, it doesn't matter what you say, this is the way that it's supposed to be, realizing that was just bullshit. It helped my process of going forward. What did you guys do, or what are you doing to make it through and heal from this trauma?
My direction was a little bit different than what you described, because I think that I actually needed to become secular to find healing for
Oh yeah, me
myself.
too.
Because for me, there wasn't like a way to redeem God at that point anymore. Because okay, even if we do the Bible of like, or I tried to go like the Matthew Vines route of like coming out and trying to be like a gay Christian, but then as I started to really think about things, I'm like, okay, but where was this God whenever I was praying? Why did He answer me? Was it really because I was wrong? So it just it kind of, for me, I felt more at peace with like, no, it's us, and then to focus on the power of storytelling. And that became because I was obsessed with like hero's journey and Joseph Campbell and the monomyth and everything. And then whenever it kind of like started to overlap with like therapy of the power of telling my story, there's healing in that and hearing other people's stories. So for me, it had a lot to do with telling honesty of who we are and what we are and how that can benefit humanity. And so that was helpful for me. And I think that like therapy, hands down, period, number one, like that is number one, that with any sort of trauma. And I'm so glad that I was able to get that. And then storytelling and just kind of like having to change my worldview. I haven't used that phrase in a while. Those were kind of the things that were the most foundational to me.
I had to leave the church too. It was because, but for me, I left because I had discovered lies. I didn't realize my abuse was actually abuse and rape and all of that until years later. I mean, I've been deconstructing for 25 years now. And in just the last, I would say 5 to 10, I was like, holy crap, this was truly abuse. Because I didn't even register it along those points. Again, it was divine. I mean, what kind of crap is divine abuse? I mean, that's just, you don't get any more deep than that too. And the shame and the fear and all of that.
And, for us who took the Bible literally, that just created these really bizarre precedents of how to expect life. And what I mentioned earlier of coming from an unstable home, that sort of example really wasn't being provided at home. So what do I have to look to? Well, here's this story about this guy who was told to murder his son as a test to God, and then that's considered normal.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like if a woman is raped, then let's treat her like property. That's so it's like whenever that like outrageous like when the book is being used as a precedent in outrageous ways, then there is no real standard for us to understand what's abuse or what isn't until we open the doors and start letting some other outside voices in to help educate us.
Yeah. I mean, I knew I had trauma, but I didn't have a place for it. I didn't have an instant for it. I just felt the pain, the violation, the shame, the fear. So once I was able to go, oh my God, I was raped, and continually, then it was, okay, now I have a name for it. I can actually process this trauma. And
Yeah. Having vocabulary.
Yeah, is a
such
lot
a
of
huge
it.
step.
Yeah, definitely.
What
about you, Rebecca?
I think for me, the big, like a big turning point for me was realizing that my motivation for pretty much every interaction or everything I did was shame. And that's a terrible motivator, but when you are raised that way and made to feel small, that's how you operate. So I constantly felt like there was an audience in my head watching every move I made and going,
Oh yeah.
I still fight that knee-jerk reaction right now. Even just going shopping, I think about like something that I'm thinking or doing, and I think the audience is like, boo. I'm like, that's not real, because it's that's how you are. Unfortunately, for me, I definitely embrace secularism because I couldn't reconcile the love that was supposed to be coming from Christ and the church with what I actually saw. And I think a big part of that was having kids. And two of my kids have special needs. And so going through that, going through that and knowing that, reading the scriptures and it's saying that, God knows how to give good gifts to his children. I thought to myself, if I could do anything to take this away from them, I would do it. And he is just choosing not to. He's choosing not to. And I couldn't believe after that. And also just seeing the lovelessness, like in religion in general. I have found more love and acceptance from the world, the otherness of the world, than I ever found in church. And
I posted that today.
Yep, and I think that too, one of the things that I really got from church was the otherness. There's us, and then there's them, and there's this dividing line, and if you cross it, you're out. And I was like excommunicated as well, and was told the people that I loved, the people who would become my family, were told not to speak with me. And so that rejection was, and then to go back and try to explain to my home church what happened and to get their like disappointment, it was all shame. And so once I started realizing that it was all shame and it wasn't healthy, and if there was a God, that he wouldn't want me to be based in shame, I realized that there was an incongruency between a loving God and what people were teaching. And so I still haven't gone, oh yes, I believe in God, or I don't believe in God. I just know that I don't believe in that. And that part of my healing has been to completely go on the other side of the spectrum and just say, screw it all. Maybe I'll find that equilibrium again. Maybe I won't. Maybe, maybe this is where I am. But I definitely think that having kids was a big thing for me, because I didn't want them to see a mom who was ashamed all the time over silly things. And that's the thing about the church. And obviously every church is not like that, but the church that I grew up in, the collection of churches, gaslighting is like the way that they do things. So they shame you and they make you feel bad and they tell you you're lowly. And then they wonder why you either, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where you do bad things, or they wonder why you don't do well in life, because you're constantly like bombarded with shame and insecurity, and it's very hard to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, I was always waiting for my sins to catch up with me, and God to, drop the firebomb. And when something would happen, I'd go, "See, I'm a sinner. That's what it was supposed to be." But you touched on something really interesting that I failed to say, and that was one of the things that really got me, was realizing that human parents, for majority speaking, were better than the God that they were telling me
Right.
to worship. You know,
Right.
when a human parent would never say, here's my child, go kill him, and I only love you, how can we say that this supreme being is worse? I could never understand that. It's like, you want me to worship someone who is worse than the worst person I know.
Mm-hmm.
How does that reconcile? But it doesn't reconcile. What it does is give them justification for the abuse.
Yes. Yep.
It's funny. I've been thinking about that specific.
One of the
go
things
ahead.
that helped. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Brady. I'm
Who's
sorry.
first? My turn. Oh,
Brady was saying something.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in.
You're fine.
I've been thinking so much about the exact example that you've been referring to, and because my brain works with stories, as I mentioned before, and so I think of that metaphor of a good father, and I think about its relationship with a literal version of God in the Bible, and the relationship between that is parasitic. I mean, God doesn't add anything to that metaphor, nor is he described by it. Instead, that version of God in the Bible, it appropriates that metaphor of like being a God, because really, like you said, there's nothing that you could point at, say, oh, God is a good father because he does this, because there are so many examples of him not answering prayer but saying he is, and telling people to like test by murder. So yeah, it's just like a appropriation, a parasitic relationship to that metaphor, and because I care about metaphors, I get really defensive about that. So sorry, Steve, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Those damn metaphors.
oh, no worries.
I know, right?
Yeah, I'm sort of yeah. I'm glad you finished, Tom, because what I was thinking was a little different in terms of what has helped me. And interestingly, the path that I've chosen as part of my recovery is getting involved with a lot of people of other faiths, especially with a lot of Muslims, but not just Muslims. A lot of people from a lot of other faiths, and honestly, I haven't taken formal data or anything, but just in my informal observations, I just see the exact same things. I see, really, really good people who are just good to the core in their heart, who can be atheists, they can be, humanists, they can be Muslims, Buddhists, Christians. There's just a lot of really good people out there. And then there's the ones that aren't good, and they're everywhere. Just like, we see in these shootings, they're just people who are messed up, who are out there. And so that sort of helps me to deal with this religious element of the trauma, in that, not seeing it as so religious. I mean, even though it came from a religious source in a time when I was, totally given over to that religion. So in that sense, it was, but at the same time, I'm seeing it as more of a human thing that we see, across the board, and just literally across the board. I'm sure. I've never studied this, but I'm sure that in some of the Buddhist scenes where they have the priests and the boys, things like that. I mean, it's just set up for people who are, somehow, for whatever reason, they become abusive, and it's just across the board. So anyway, that's helped me kind of dissociate it from anything to do with God, and more just a human element of our existence.
I think whenever there is inequity, there's going to be some type of abuse, because if when you get that power, that is when the abuse occurs. In doing the research for this, there was virtually no peer-to-peer. It was all powerful people that are creating the abuse. I guess peer-to-peer would be dating them, right? But I mean, it's more of a abuse. It's a structure, and that power is what enables them to do so. Without that power, they're just not even there.
I think that the need for power as well comes from a deprivation, even in leadership, a deprivation of actually following your intuition or pursuing happiness, because that's, sinful. So I think that in order to, some people, in order to retain any sort of power, those are the types of things that they do, unfortunately. And then the people who are, not, who are subjugated underneath them because of dogma or whatever, are the people who suffer, and I do think that need for power is a type of suffering. Unfortunately, it's just it's a malfunction of deprivation, at least in my experience. That's what I've seen.
Okay, we are down to the last 10 minutes. Didn't that fly?
It did.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Tim, I see your comment. Unfortunately, we're going to lose Steve and half of Rebecca in showing this, but I want to go ahead and show this comment. Early Christians were put at risk with the empire when they were baptized. It's so true. The wedding of Christianity is the idea that the empire was to contra the teachings of Jesus when power over became an article of faith. As a result, they gave way to the doctrine of discovery. The us and them paradigm developed, and conquered male dominance ensued, and the pillaging and confiscation of the edge of the sword became the norm. It is no wonder that the present religion of the United States is characterized by this. So true. Do we have any questions from anyone in the audience? There's always like a 30 or 40-second delay with these things, so our comments get a little bit.
Well, while we wait for a question, I just wanted to kind of throw out there, awareness on spiritual abuse was huge for me, right? And understanding that you can't deconstruct or think through trauma, but it's something that has to be like physically worked through. And like that was a big thing for me to learn, whereas I think a lot of us may think of trauma as just a bunch of confusion that you just need to think out, but that's not really the case. There's much more to it that's into us physically, almost.
Yeah, it's a deliberate, physical, pursuit of health, pretty much.
Yeah.
You can't. It doesn't just happen. Yeah. So, for sure, I agree with you.
I actually, I posted this on Facebook, but a week or so ago, I inadvertently ended up on an interview with a cult. Full-blown cult. I had hoped that the website was a typo and it really wasn't this cult, and then I get on the call and it was a cult. I was very professional. I stated my piece, but it wasn't until I was able to get away, literally take myself out of that call, where I went, holy shit, this is what they said to me. And I think that's part of the power of the religion, right? Is once they get you in, they don't let you go. So you're not allowed to think. You're not allowed to process. I mean, this guy wanted me going after people to take their wills. He wanted me to go and get people to sign their whole estate over to this cult. And as he's saying this in such a nice and pleasant way of, we're helping people and this is karma points. It wasn't until after I got out of the call and got away from it that I was like, okay, this is wrong. This is so wrong. And when you can't get away is when they grab you, is when they know and when they do all of those things.
Kirsten had a question here. Every faith has rituals of letting go, healing, and connection. Are there any ways faith has been a resource even though it has also been a roadblock? My answer to that, Jesus' teaching on treat others the way you want to be treated, that became kind of like a standard for me, even when it came to information, because to me, that's objectivity. treating others the way that you want to be treated when it comes to information is objectivity. So like just adding that element and kind of having like a an ecosystem of treatment that works on its own kind of like helped come out and like helped me deconstruct things in a lot of ways. So that was one way that it helped me.
For me, I lost my faith in religion and found it in love. I have faith that love will conquer all. I have faith that even in the worst of humanity, there is goodness and that we can find that love. Beyond that, I don't know that I have that much faith anymore. I have no faith in man, in humans per se. But the faith that love will win and that goodness will prevail is where my faith comes from.
For me, as far as being a resource, it's...
Go.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Rebecca. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I find a lot of humor in it. So, like, I appreciate that. It's helped me develop a twisted sense of humor. So, that's always something.
Humor gets us all through. What were you going to say, Steve?
Oh, I was just going to say, to answer that question, no, I didn't find anything at least in my former faith that helped me. It could have been just, the baggage from it all. But where I really found the help was going within and understanding myself, what was going on inside of me, who I was and how I was feeling, and reprogramming myself, reprogramming the way I thought about things that got me into this in the very first place. I found vastly more help in doing that and doing the inner work, the psychological work to understand myself, as opposed to any kind of faith rituals. Now, revisiting it now when I was going through it, of course, it was so intense. I probably say that I would enjoy those things more now at this stage of the game. But back then, I didn't find it helpful.
Yeah, the pain. Anyone want to take on Amanda's question before we close this out? Amanda said, "What are your thoughts on pertaining to spiritual warfare?"
As a secular person, I guess like the things that I would have called spiritual warfare before, to me now are just like areas where we need accountability and progression. So like, before I would have looked at spiritual warfare as like somebody who's being abusive and needs to stop, or if somebody's mistreating somebody, or to try to get a job or whatever. Situational thing is how I'd have looked at it then. And I think that now I would word it differently and just say like, no, there's things that we can do as people to kind of fill in these blanks where things are being left out and people are being harmed or hurt. That's just my thought.
For me, spiritual warfare is the fight between love and ego. Either love is giving, ego is taking. So that's where the spiritual warfare, am I going to care for my fellow man, or am I going to care about me more? And that gets into it. Any other comments before we close this out?
Just one thing that I'd wanted to say. I don't cut me off whenever you need to.
You're fine. It's internet. We're okay.
Okay. One of the things I really wanted to say was that so many people. I don't know if Brady and Rebecca and Sherry, if you guys feel this also, but a lot of times I have people, especially my former Christian friends. They see where I am now, and they look at me and they look at me with pity, and they feel sorry for me, and they say, "Wow, you've just been through so much. I can see why you gave up your faith." And they 100% attribute where I am now. They define me based on the trauma that happened to me, and I really don't like that.
No.
The trauma very much did affect me, but it doesn't define me. And
yes.
Yeah, sure. I can tell you that through the trauma, I held on to God, and but what it did allow me to do was to begin to start addressing those nagging questions that I had in the back of my mind that I, never really let myself ask when I was all in. That's what it did do. It did let me start answering those little knocks on the door of my intellect, and asking myself, well, is the New Testament, I don't want to get into all the details, but all these questions, that you have, and that's what the result of. That's why it's the lack of answers to those questions that I started asking that caused me to start to back away from my commitment to my faith. It was not the trauma that destroyed my life or whatever. It was. It's not. That's not how it was. So I just want to make that really clear.
I am who I am because of my trauma and in spite of it. Like, they thought they were going to break me down and get me to stop talking, or to get me to be submissive, and my rebellion kicked in and only made me stronger. Now I have the strength to actually stand up and to walk away, as opposed to crumble and hide. And I am thankful for that. I am. I mean, I wish I didn't. I didn't need the trauma to become this person. Obviously, I would give it away in a second. But in spite of it, I have become a stronger person. You guys have been phenomenal. I knew this conversation was going to rock, and I want to give each of you guys a final words. And let's go backwards this time. Steve, I'm going to head it to you first. Final words for our guests.
Okay, so what I do now is have a little nonprofit called Salam. I bring people together, just like you see in this picture, old white guys getting together with people of color. And this is where I find so much satisfaction and so much meaning. And so we bring people together. So check out our website, check out our programs. And yeah, thank you.
Rebecca. Oh, where'd you go? I don't have you. You're muted. You're muted.
You're muted.
Brady, while she gets fixed, why don't you go?
Yeah, no problem. So right now, we've been taking a little bit of a break with our podcast, but it's coming back soon. I'm very excited about that. One of the episodes that I want to make is, I haven't told anybody about this, so keep it a secret. I want to make an episode with my ex-wife.
Cool.
For us to talk about how our spiritual abuse was from different angles and stuff like that. And in addition to the podcast, we have an online community for people who are deconstructing their faith or questioning, doubting, whatever. And that's found through our Facebook, the Life After podcast and community. And other than that, that's about all I've got going on right now that I'm ready to talk about. I have some writing projects, but who knows how many years that's going to take. So that's where I'm at right now.
Rebecca, are you back?
I think so. Yes,
you are.
Yay!
I don't know what happened. I didn't push anything. I guess I was just gonna. I just wanted to leave this thought because Steve said something about people saying about him losing his faith and stuff, and I have found personally that people have a misconception about when people leave faith or when they lose faith that it's because we want to embrace ill behavior or something. It's a soul-sucking, soul-crushing journey that nobody wants to lose their faith. Nobody wants to not believe anymore. Nobody wants to feel that they were brainwashed and that they have to reconstruct. And so if you do have somebody in your life, if you're a person of faith, and you have somebody in your life that is going through that journey, be gracious and kind, because that's hard work. It's very hard work, and there's no such thing as leaving the fold. We just change, we evolve. And to invite, just to embrace people with love. That having a group on social media who has gone through my deconstruction with me has changed my life. And so just reach out to the people you love, your friends. Virtual relationships, virtual friendships are completely legitimate.
Oh,
you know,
yes.
And so just reach out to those people and be encouraged.
Dang.
Yeah, I wish I would have learned more love and compassion in church. I got it all outside of it. The trauma inside, right? Okay, well, I'm going to say goodbye to you guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to put you on backstage, and we can talk after after I end the broadcast live. Thank you so very much. And everybody is saying thank you. It went too fast. I'm sure you can see the comments. Goodbye, Steve. Oh, I brought him back. Bye, Rebecca, and bye, Brady. Oh, I love that. Okay, so tell me, guys, do we continue this conversation next week, or do we start on deconstruction? I'm not going to make it solely that you have to answer right now. Go ahead and private message me, enter it into the group, tell me what you guys want to do for next week, and by the morning, I will go ahead and announce what we're going to do. Also, be sure to go ahead. I would love your support. I'm trying to do all of this stuff on the free, and I can really blow this up if I get some support from you guys. So visit sherrypalace.com and then check the support button. I appreciate all of you guys so much and listening and being willing to learn and to hear all of our stories. Thanks for following along. I will see you guys next week. Hit the subscribe and share and send your friends and all of that good stuff. Mwah. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.